Hello and welcome to the Couch GM podcast, part of the Couch Scouts family of podcasts. And I'm really excited about this. I can't wait to introduce you to my friend, my co-host, Skip Newton. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Matt. It's great to be here. It's awesome to join the Couch Scouts family, and looking forward to continuing to podcast with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that don't know, Skip and I have been podcasting together for the last few years over on the Rookie Big Board Network. We did a show called the Debbie Big Board. Shout out to Matt Hicks and those guys. It was a fantastic experience. Love everything he does over there. If you haven't already, definitely check out the Rookie Big Board. We highly recommend it. But I convinced Skip to come do a podcast with me over here on our channel as well. And he very graciously said yes. And so Skip and I have been podcasting together for years. You actually also podcasted with Matt Jackson when he was first getting started as a content creator. So definitely a friend of the podcast and excited to have you here on the show officially. This show is going to be a little bit different than our usual Tuesday night show. You heard me introduce it as the Couch GM podcast. And, a good GM needs a good scout, right? You can't do the job of a GM without a good scouting department. But scouting is only half the battle. And so you need to also, there's a huge element to dynasty fantasy football of managing your roster and making trades. And, when you're in the draft, trading up, trading down, reacting to news, setting a lineup, all that kind of stuff. And so our podcast is going to be more focused on that side of things, the managerial GM side of dynasty, and I'm really, really excited about that. I think it's going to complement our other show really well. And we're excited to have two shows coming to your feed every week instead of one. So it's going to be a good time. You ready to get into it, Skip?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get going with the first podcast here. I love the idea kicking it off that we were talking about how we've got a mock draft that you guys did right in the Couch Scouts Discord. Is that correct?
Yep, that is right. So if you don't know, if you're new listening to the show, we have a free Discord, which no strings attached. We just want to get to know the people that listen to our show. It's a great community, almost 200 guys in there that are posting their trades for advice, reacting to news as it breaks during the season. People post their start sits, all kinds of stuff. And so one of the things we did in there was we did a community mock draft, Superflex tight end premium. So we had 12 guys from the Discord participate, including myself. And we thought, mock drafts are always fun this time of year. But on the main show, we're so focused on scouting these individual prospects that we haven't had time to do a mock draft. And so this is perfect. So for us, what we're going to do is we're going to react to that mock draft from the Discord. And I'm excited to get into it and just talk about where people went. Do we like that? Do we think it's too high, too low? What can we glean from that here in February? And what might be very different come April? So, gonna talk about all that stuff tonight.
Yeah, and a lot of this, of course, will change, and we'll discuss that as we get closer and closer to April's draft. The combine and just analysis. We'll listen to news. It always amazes me how much players' positions in the draft will continue to rise and fall, even though they're not playing football anymore. But it's
Hmm.
incredible how that stock goes up and down. But the biggest one is after the draft, landing spots and draft capital. Of course, we'll talk about that, big time when that comes around. But that'll change a lot. But it'll be fun to analyze this and do our own mock draft, maybe in a week or two, and then see how things change based on the news that we get between now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you ready to get into it?
Absolutely, let's do this.
So, we're gonna start with round one here, and I think we're just gonna go pick by pick, and we're gonna talk about it. So, we'll get a little bit of player analysis in here, but y'all are obviously getting that on the other podcast. So, we're gonna be mostly focused on kind of ADP here and where the value's at. As we go along, maybe we'll have some discussions on if you were on the clock here. Would you think about trading back or trading out of the pick for a veteran, that type of thing? But at the 101, no surprises here. Brian C. took Ashton Genty, running back out of Boise State. Any qualms from you with this pick, Skip Newton?
No, my only comment on this is if you have the 101, even if it's a super flex draft, don't overthink it. Don't
Hmm.
don't draft a quarterback because I'm sure one of these guys will go high and you might need a quarterback and say, "Oh, it's super flex. I got to take a quarterback." I think Genty is a slam dunk a prospect as we've seen, for at running back, since Bijan and Gibbs, and look at them. I mean, they're
Hmm.
both performing well.
Absolutely.
And as soon as he hits the field, as soon as he hits, gets drafted, I mean, where are you putting him in your dynasty rankings? He's top 10 for sure, if not maybe even pushing
Higher.
top 5. And that value that you're adding to your roster, that's the most obvious move here. And so, yeah, great pick by Brian. I mean, everyone says, "Oh yeah, it's the easy one," but sometimes people they outthink themselves. Just don't do
Yeah,
that.
even they'll go like, "Oh, well, I'm rebuilding," and so you don't want to. The first position you don't target in a rebuild is running back. But still, I mean, you take the best player available. I,
Yes.
I think for me, that's pretty clearly Genty. I mean, even if you look at ADP, right? So Dynasty Data Labs has startup ADP. The 10th pick right now is Bijan Robinson. The 12th pick is Jameer Gibbs. And let's say one of these quarterbacks hits, right? What's the ceiling? Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders. Are they going to be higher than Patrick Mahomes at QB6? Even in a best case scenario, I don't think so. So he's ninth in the ADP and Bijan's 10th. So in my mind, Genty's ceiling is just as high as the quarterbacks. You're talking about roughly a top 10 to 12 startup pick if they hit at absolute ceiling. And Genty just has such a better floor
Yeah.
than these quarterbacks do. So yeah, I'm with you. It's the right pick for sure.
Now this the second one, it's interesting because I'm in a mock draft on another chat, and I was sitting at 102, and I found myself like, oh wow, it's 102, and I'm already being forced to think like this isn't like usually it's a slam dunk,
Hmm.
especially like last year you kind of knew really the top 4 or 5 like right away, but I struggled a little bit. It's like, man, I'm not really sure. And then I ended up making the same choice that Mike made here and went with Cam Ward. And in the mock that I was looking or that I was doing, they had landing spots. And so Cam Ward was a top 5 pick in the draft and he went to the Giants. I'm thinking, okay,
Okay.
I don't think I can pass on that. Now here we don't know landing spots, but we're just going to assume that he's going to get the draft capital because I
Hmm.
think he's the number 1 quarterback in the draft. I know it's not as strong at that position, but still in a super flex, I think there's enough questions about the guys that went after him to where I'm comfortable taking a chance on Cam Ward here at 102.
Yeah, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me and Jackson and Rupert all rave about Travis Hunter. We absolutely love him. We think he's a stud. We think he's worth the risk. So my 102 would have been Travis Hunter, um, spicy as that may be. And he actually goes here at 103. So that to me is right where he belongs. But Skip, I know we're above consensus on him, and I'm curious what you think. Did you feel like this Travis Hunter pick was too high?
I I do not. I'm actually surprised that you're behind it because we've talked about this and you were concerned about Hunter playing primarily corner and not getting enough snaps at wide
Yeah.
receiver, which is literally, in my opinion, the only concern with
Hmm.
Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
If
So that
if
was previous prior to we scouted him in depth, watched the all 22 film for our Travis Hunter breakdown on the podcast a couple weeks ago. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen because we had a lot to say. But yeah, when I watched him on tape as a wide receiver, I was like, "Look, this guy's worth a top 10 NFL draft pick, even if he didn't play any other positions. If he was just a wide receiver, he's
yes,
that good, and he's only been playing the position for 2 years." So the film is juicy for Travis Hunter. The
Oh,
upside is
I love him.
insane. Uh, yeah, I think he's every bit worth the risk, and he's probably going to go high enough in the NFL draft that the team that takes him wants to play him on both sides of the ball. I don't think he's going to be a full time cornerback. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
that'll be
all in.
interesting to see how that plays out because
Hmm.
if you look at, I mean, just from a sheer money standpoint, I mean, the top wide receivers are getting paid more than the top corners.
They are.
So if he honestly thinks like we do that he can be an elite wide receiver in the NFL, I mean, does he and his agent, have that conversation about, listen, we want him playing wide receiver because we
Hmm.
think that's where you're going to get the best bang for your buck. It's so hard to find great cover corners, so I can see why teams would push for that side. It's an interesting dilemma, but yeah, I mean, to get back to the mock, I think it's worth it because I think he is arguably the most talented player in the draft.
I agree with you. So at 104, Genji takes Luther Burden. This would have been like, I mean, you'd have been jumping for joy. We as Devi players, we co-host a Devi podcast together. Uh, you know, preseason before the college season started, if you'd have got Luther Burden at 104, you're jumping for joy. His stock has fallen a little bit. Are you still okay with him being up here at the 104?
I'm not sure I would have taken him at 104 here. I don't think. Oh, let me rephrase. I'm not taking him over Tet McMillan, and I'm not taking him over Amarian Hampton. So those two guys, for sure, I would put above him. After that, it I think that's where you're for me, you're getting into the next tier. It's like, okay, where does Burden, fall? How does that work? I still like the traits a lot. The last season was disappointing, but it's not as talented and deep at wide receiver. So it's him and Ibuka, and then, or obviously Ted McMillan, but those three are I think that covers the wide receivers at least right now that are worthy to go in the first round of a rookie. I think it's a strong running back class. So yeah, I probably would have dropped him down at least below those next two guys.
Yeah, I have him and Tet McMillan within half a point of each other in my film grades. I think they're in the same tier. Um, and I could see how the NFL is maybe trending a little bit more towards these smaller yards after catch um, type of guys than the big bodied X receiver on the boundary. So I can't fault somebody if they have Luther Burden higher than Tet. And I agree with you, though, on Hampton. I've got Hampton a couple points higher than him and at a scarcer position. So I think he belongs in this discussion. It's in the right range. You're splitting hairs. I would have waited a couple picks on him, but I'm totally fine with the pick there. And at 105, the aforementioned Amarian Hampton does go off the board. Psalm 3303, Quinn Selman took Amarian Hampton, running back out of UNC. And you just mentioned him, so I assume you're okay with the pick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think he can be a three down stud in the NFL. It's a like we said, it's a deep running back class, but it's talented as well. It's not just, top heavy with Genty. There's going to be talent to be had all throughout not only the first round of your rookie draft, but in the second as well. And I think this is the year where dynasty players, managers can try to get out of that usual habit of I want to build my roster with wide receivers first.
Hmm.
You really have to look at the talent of the class. And this year, I'm going to find myself probably picking running back over wide receiver frequently. And in this example, I have no problem with Hampton here at all.
Yeah, he's my RB2 so far. I haven't studied everybody in the class yet, obviously, but I've got him at a perfect 10 out of 10 for physicality and power. I mean, he just absolutely demolishes people, drops the pads and lowers the boom, breaks tackles like crazy. He's explosive and fast for being as big as he is. Not the most laterally quick guy, not the most elusive guy, but man, he's a powerful north-south runner with explosiveness, and he can catch passes too, and he's great in pass protection. So I'm high on Omarion Hampton and totally cool with the pick here at 105. I was on the clock at 106, and I was so assuming that Tet McMillan was going to be gone before it got to me that when I was looking through the player pool, I kind of skipped right over him. And I actually, so I took originally, I took Emeka Ibuka, and then somebody was like, "Wow, Tet McMillan still on the board at 107." I was like, "Wait, whoa, I got to change that pick. The next person
Yeah,
hasn't made their pick yet. I'm changing it." I was shocked that Tet McMillan was on the board at 106, and pleasantly surprised. I think um, there are some concerns about separation and him
right.
being a contested catch guy, and you know, he's not the biggest, like the best athlete in the world. I don't think he's a bad athlete by any stretch. I think, for his size, he actually has really good movement skills. But yeah, that archetype has disappointed even as recently as this year with Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze. Both of those bigger bodied X receivers didn't live up to expectations. So I can kind of see why people are nervous about Tet McMillan. You got the Pac-12 thing going on too. So there's definite stigmas there that we've got to get over. But I think Tet McMillan's a really good player. I think he's going to get great draft capital. I think he's kind of a steal at 106. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you how quickly did it take you to make that pick, but obviously you thought he's already gone and
I
you had
thought he
to.
was gone, man.
That's
I
crazy,
wasn't
but
paying enough attention.
yeah, I mean, obviously this is a slam dunk. I mean, he's a first round talent. He's been the wide receiver one for I think majority of the last year in the Devi community as the top guy, and he could be the first full time wide receiver off the board. I think Travis Hunter goes in the actual NFL draft before he does, but I too get a little nervous when the knock on a wide receiver, um, when that when that comes around and people say, well, he might have a little problem with separation. That does always give me pause. There
Hmm.
there are some times when an analyst will say something about a prospect, or I'll notice something, like Genty, like the one thing that people seem to be searching for as far as a negative on him is that, well, he doesn't have top end breakaway speed. And when a running back literally does everything else and that's his one
Hmm.
thing, I don't care. It's like, oh, whatever. So he gets 45-yard runs instead of 65-yard runs. I'm okay with that. Wide receiver, the separation thing that
Yeah.
does concern me a little bit. That said, I remember when Drake London came out, there people said that about him, and I thought it was fair. I saw it too. It felt like he just
Hmm.
used his frame to shield defenders off. He used his height to his advantage. He won a lot of contested catches. He separated, vertically, like, because I'm taller and I can
Yep.
win up high, but I'm not going to create like 2 yards of space between myself and the defender. But Drake London has been a good fantasy wide receiver. I mean, he was a
Yeah.
wide receiver one this season. So I think there's every chance for McMillan to still be as high
Yeah.
as a wide receiver
And
one.
I also I love the Drake London call out there because there's a lot of similarities in the sense of Drake London wasn't a burner. He wasn't the best for being a tall guy. He wasn't the best at beating press coverage and kind of burning you down the field. He was winning on short to intermediate routes. And I think Tet's the same way. He's not that boundary guy that's going to be, catching mossing people 50 yards down the field. He's not your Mike Evans archetype. He's more in that Drake London. Like he actually cooks people in the short to intermediate. He's a really good route runner with surprising lateral agility for his size. It's really the release against press coverage is my biggest concern with Tet McMillan. he doesn't release well. He just kind of runs in a straight line and tries to bully people and box out at the catch point. So that's the area of his game that he's weak. But it's not that he can't run routes or he can't separate. It's just it's more over the middle stuff that he's really good at. The boundary stuff that you would expect a 6'5" guy to be good at. He mostly relies on the contested catch there.
Yeah, it makes sense. The next guy, Egbuka 107 by Foz. I think this is exactly where Egbuka is going to land, right in that 105 to 108 range. I think it makes a lot of sense for me. He's the overlooked. He's maybe the best wide receiver to not get any hype in a while. Like nobody talks about what a great career this guy had at Ohio State, but he just continuously put up good numbers and he looks good. I have every expectation of him being a solid to very good wide receiver in the NFL. I I just think I don't think he has as high of a ceiling as some guys, but I think that the odds of him being a complete bust are almost nil. I think there's no way this guy's not going to be at least a wide receiver too.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This people might accuse me of helmet scouting, but he reminds me a lot of Chris Olave, who also had a little bit of that capped upside, but was such a safe prospect. And I remember the year that Olave was a rookie. I made the comp to Hawkeye for the Avengers. I was like, "You're picking at the back end of the first round. That means you've got a loaded squad. You don't need another Captain America. Get yourself Hawkeye. Like he's Mr. Reliable. He's gonna be the complementary piece that you need to add to your contending roster."
Yeah, the
And
one guy that's married and has kids, just a normal family guy. I mean, you gotta you
yeah,
gotta have that on your Marvel
no
roster.
superpowers. He's just, he's the glue guy. He's the glue guy.
Exactly.
Mr. Reliable. You can count on him when everybody else is falling apart. He's going to take you to his farm and put the team back together. So no, that is kind of how I view Abuka, similarly to how I saw Olave when he was a rookie. And I think getting him on a contending roster in the late first round is a great move. So good pick there by Foz. One thing that is interesting to note, Foz is our quarterback guru. So when we do the rookie guide, he does all of our quarterback profiles. He's a former coach. He really understands the position. He understands what quarterbacks should be seeing and how they should be reading the defense, all that kind of stuff. A lot better than I do, I would say. And he didn't take Shador Sanders here.
Right.
So he,
I
he's on he's on at 107. He's our quarterback guy, and he fades Shador Sanders. So interesting note there, to say the
Yeah, it
least.
is. And we'll talk more about him when we get down to the 110, but at 108 there, Tyler Warren, the first tight end. I think it's going to be interesting to see which tight end goes first, not only in rookie drafts, but in the NFL draft, because I have every expectation that both Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland will be first round picks in the draft.
Mhm.
And they both look very good. And this could be another year where we get a couple of really good rookie tight ends, if not more, because I think there's some talent deep at the position as well. So seeing these two guys go in the first round doesn't surprise me at all. I have every expectation. In fact, depending on the steam that one of them might pick up, or the draft capital, or the landing spot, we might see one of them even slip into the top six. I mean, in some leagues for sure.
Yeah, Tyler Warren. This was a tight end premium mock draft. So tight end out of Penn State. We are expecting at this point probably first round draft capital. Had an incredible season at Penn State with over 100 catches, which you just don't see that out of college tight ends. Did a lot of other things too. He ran the ball for them. He threw the ball for them. He was kind of this Swiss Army knife for that Penn State offense. Some might say he threw the ball better than Drew Aller did. Um,
Oof.
some might. I'm not saying I'm saying that, but some might. But No, he's a talented dude. I think when you compare him to Loveland, Loveland to me, I think seems more refined than Warren, but Warren is just so athletic um, that he's a mismatch. So yeah, these two are both though they profile as receiving tight ends. They're not going to be out there doing a bunch of blocking, and you love that. So for a tight end premium league, you get a guy who profiles as a true receiving tight end, probably going to get first round draft capital, athletic. I mean, it's kind of everything that you're looking for. So I can't fault Slimer for taking him here at the 108 at all. Um, Before we get on to the 109, I want to take a quick break to just shout out this is the number one time of year to join the Couch Scouts family. We provide league winning analysis and tools to help you dominate your league and build a dynasty. I believe my philosophy is if you can dominate your draft, and this is why we focus so heavily on scouting, you're going to continue to accrue value on your roster. And the more that you have a value edge over the guys in your league, the more chips that you have to push in for trades. Like you've got all the leverage in trade negotiations because everybody wants who you have. And, you know, that all this strategy stuff that we are talking about on this show is possible because you nail the scouting and you nail your draft. And rookie content is our bread and butter. We release bonus podcasts every week just for members, breaking down some of the biggest sleeper names that you need to know in this class. We did Jalen Knoll this past week on the show. We did RJ Harvey, Cameron Skataboo, however you want to say that one. So a lot of these sleeper names that maybe are not going in the first round of this mock draft. We're covering them on the bonus show for our members. Soon, we're going to be releasing our 2025 Couch Scouts rookie guide, covering over 60 prospects with in depth film analysis, grades, pre and post draft rankings. It is the ultimate cheat sheet for dominating your rookie draft. And you can get access to all that and more at couchscouts.com today for as low as $5 a month or save 15% with an annual subscription. Again, that is couchscouts.com. So, with that out of the way, let's continue at 109 in our rookie mock draft here. Our friend Brian F., he's also a rookie big board patron member. Brian F., he took Travion Henderson at the 109. What do you think about that pick, Skip Newton?
I like it. I think again, it's a strong high end running back class. I think Henderson has big play star potential. You know, coming out of Ohio State, he's looked like a top prospect ever since he got there. And, you know, right away, I mean, I remember his first game. I think the first time he touched the ball, he busted through for a 73-yard touchdown run against my Gophers. I'm almost positive my memory is serving me well in this instance. And and he just, you know, he had a little bit of injury issue the sophomore year, but you know, came back and he just he's explosive and he can make plays. And I think that is that has a very good chance of getting him drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. And that means he absolutely belongs in the first round of your rookie draft. And at
Mm-hmm.
109, I mean that could end up being a steal. I mean, I think, you know, between him and his backfield teammate, we'll talk about in a little bit. I mean, those guys could end up moving up because I mean there's a lot of running backs I think that can be top end fantasy running backs in this draft. I like Henderson a lot. I think this is a good pick by Brian.
Yeah, he's a well-rounded player. He's not the most elusive guy in the world, but he can make you miss. He's not the most powerful guy in the world, but he can take a hit and knock you backwards. He's never going to have to come off the field because he's incredible in pass protection. He's got a great, I would say, even a better receiving skill set than what he was able to show at Ohio State because they didn't use him a ton that way. But there's these flashes of him just routing guys up down the field and you're like, wow, like he could be a really high level PPR guy if he gets used the right way at the next level. So yeah, I think this is a good pick here from Brian. And at 110, finally, Shador Sanders comes off the board. Rudy, takes Shador Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado, at the 110. I mean, what is this? Is he catching a falling knife here, or did he get a steal?
Boy, that's the $1,000,000 question, and I think he might be the most polarizing prospect in this draft, especially from a
Hmm.
fantasy perspective, because it feels like people either love him or they want nothing to do with him. And I'm more on the side of I don't think I'm going to end up with shares of him.
Hmm.
Maybe if he falls this far and he's a first round quarterback, I'll be like, okay,
Hmm.
now it's too good to be true. But like I'm not taking him. I'm not taking him over Quinshon Judkins at this point, who's taken right after. So, the fact that Foz is your quarterback guy and he passed on him says something to me. I'm concerned about Shooter Sanders, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, but man, it feels like every draft there's one quarterback that people end up taking early, and I fade, and I haven't had one yet where I was proven to really regret it. I tend to pick the fades fairly well, at least in recent years. So
Except for Bo Nix, right?
I'm
You're
still
not
not
ready
sure
to take the
he's
L on
that
that
good.
one yet.
I think that might have been his stealing, but we'll see.
uh,
Maybe I'm wrong on Bo Nix. That so far I am, but that's a good point. That's glad you brought that up.
No, I had to do it to you. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on Sanders. I think in the scenario that he is a top 5 NFL draft pick and still falls here to the 110, I'm strongly considering it.
Yeah.
But I think if he goes that high, he probably goes higher in the draft than I'm willing to take him. Like, I don't think he's sitting here at 110 if we knew for sure that he was a top 5 pick. Um, I think he's not as mobile as people think. He can escape pressure in the pocket, and he's doing it to look to throw down the field, but he's really not that fast. So there's no rushing upside. He doesn't have the biggest arm. I think he's accurate when he's able to throw on time, on target, out of the pocket, but he has a tendency to hold the ball way too long. And there's just so many things that over the years I've learned, like, man, if a quarterback holds the ball too long, it's not good for him. If a quarterback doesn't have rushing upside for fantasy, it's not good for him. He's just got too many of those things that past experience tells me they could be deal breakers. And I have a hard time buying in on him as well. So, two more picks here to cover in the first round, and we're going to pick up next week with round two. But at the 111, RW40, my friend Reagan from the Discord, he takes Quinshon Judkins. Skip, you've mentioned his name a couple times already in the last few minutes, so I'll let you lead off. What do you like about Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State?
I like a lot. I mean, the power that he runs with, the fact that he is going to I think he's just going to get you a lot of just really good solid play. He's not gonna take a lot of losses in the backfield. He's not gonna make bad decisions. He can find a lane, he'll hit it, hard. He's physical. I mean, he is going to run through people and break tackles. I I think Judkins has the upside of being, a team's number one running back and would have no problem with him on my dynasty roster. I think this is going to be one of those years where you can acquire a couple running backs. If you have both your first and second round picks. I mean, you take a running back in both rounds because we're going to talk about guys next week that I absolutely really like. But yeah,
Mhm.
Judkins, this makes sense to me. I mean, I feel like I would have slammed this at 111 if I were in the same position as Reagan.
Yeah, I like Judkins. I don't love Judkins. I think he's a smart running back. He's a tough running back. He can catch passes, although, it's one of those, like, if he's on a team with somebody else who can do it, at a high level, they're going to take him off the field for it because he's passable, but he's not great in the
Right.
third down department. Um, he's got good initial burst, not the fastest guy. Once he gets up to speed, gets run down pretty consistently. Um, not the most elusive guy, but he does have a good power element to his game. He's a power back. I think amongst power backs in this class, maybe it's because there are so many other good ones that he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I love Hampton and Genty a good bit more than Judkins. And then there's another guy that we're going to talk about next week that I like him at his cost better than I like spending a first round pick on Judkins. So y'all have to tune in next week to figure out who we're talking about. I might have taken the 112 here above Judkins, and that is Colston Loveland. Zach Haugen took Colston Loveland at the 112 with the last pick that we're going to be talking about on the show tonight. Tight end out of Michigan. Again, this is a tight end premium mock draft. So I think we assumed 1.5 points per reception for tight ends. And for me, I mean, I haven't taken a deep dive on the tight end position. I'm not totally convinced at this point that I won't have Colston Loveland higher than Tyler Warren when all is said and done. Because every time that I have watched any Michigan at all this year, whether it's been cutting them up for the Dynasty Nerds film room or just casually watching in a live game, Colston Loveland just pops off the screen. He is a very technically sound route runner. His release off the line of scrimmage is phenomenal. He looks like a wide receiver running routes out there, which is just my kind of player.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just very technically refined, but he's athletic too, and he can go up and high point the ball. He's got great ball skills, and I think he is kind of flying not totally under the radar because obviously we're talking about him at 112, but just that Michigan offense, there was no quarterback play. The stat line ended up being a little bit underwhelming for Colston Loveland. He's not playing on the big stage in the college football playoff like Tyler Warren was. So I'm not convinced he's not better than Tyler Warren and just is not getting the love, the public hype that Warren is right now. So I'm interested to see where I stand on that when all is said and done. And I've done my in-depth film study. But I think in a tight end premium league, this is a value here at 112.
Yeah, he's one of those guys you're gonna have to, especially when comparing him to Warren, is really rely on, the measurables and the film, watching the tape, seeing what you can see when he is running routes, when he does have the ball in his hands, and not focus on the huge production profile difference, because obviously that's massive with Warren having over 100 catches. Uh, this is one of those situations, at tight end where I actually find a lot of value in the combine. And I think that allows us to see just how athletic some of these guys are,
Hmm.
and guys that stand out athletically at tight end make a difference to me. I think that matters
It
because
does.
their upside from a fantasy perspective is so much higher than, just a regular dude that, yeah, he's a really good blocker. He's going to be on the field. But guess what? He's going to catch 3 or 4 passes for 30, 40 yards and maybe the touchdown every fourth game. I mean, that he might be a very
Hmm.
good tight end for that NFL team, but he's not so good for your dynasty team. I mean, we can find, 12 guys that can do that. So the athletic guys are the ones that I like to move up my rankings. And if Loveland looks the part, assuming that he works out at the combine, if he
Hmm.
looks good athletically, I think that combined with the film study can do a lot to boost his stock, and probably why he'll be a first round NFL draft pick.
Hmm. I agree with you, and this will be another thing that we talk about on this show that we don't get as much of a chance to talk on the Couch Scouts podcast is the combine afterwards. We're going to be able to react to that, and so we'll give more in depth thoughts there in a few weeks. But last question for you, Skip, before we wrap up the show here: is there any point on the board in this first round where you would have, if you were on the clock, thought, man, I'd like to explore trading down here? Um, or is there a spot where you're like, man, that's a screaming value, and if that guy fell, I would have been trying to trade up for him?
I think just looking at the board, if I'm sitting down in the last half and it gets to 105 and Hampton is still there, I may have been trying to trade up to get Hampton at the 105. Probably could make that same statement for Tet McMillan at 106. I think
Mhm.
both those guys fell. After that,
Mhm.
I could see, I could see if I'm sitting at 107, I'm perfectly happy trading down 2 or 3 spots. And if that means I end up with Tyler Warren or Henderson
I
or
totally agree with you.
someone else, I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, and so since we are talking strategy on this show, it's good to know where your tier breaks are.
Oh,
And
it's
so
huge. You have to
yeah,
know tier breaks.
so the 106 for me right there with McMillan feels like a tear break. Like
Yep.
Abuka is solid, but he doesn't have the upside that those top 6 guys have. And really, I feel equally comfortable drafting Abuka, Warren, Henderson, Loveland. Again, I'm not quite as high on Judkins or Sanders, but really anybody in that grouping of 4 players of Abuka, Warren, Henderson, Loveland, I'm fine with. So if I'm sitting there at 107, I'm trying to explore, can I trade back to 110, maybe even 111 or 112, and just bank that like somebody's going to take Judkins or Sanders, um, and one of my guys that I really like is going to fall, and I can get a plus on top. So knowing what your tiers are, and if you're sitting at the top of a tier, and you can trade back and get a guy you like just as much while picking up value, that's the kind of thing you want to keep an eye on. So I thought that'd be a good nugget to mention here at the end of the show, especially as we're a more strategy focused show here.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And we'll get into those tiers, when we get into April and revisit them, right after the
Hmm.
NFL draft, so we kind of set those tiers in stone, going into our rookie drafts, which typically take place in early May.
Yep. Well, that's going to do it for the show this week. Like I said, we're going to be doing round 2 next week. I hope you guys enjoyed the new show. I'm really excited about it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Couch GM podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check the show notes to join our free community Discord. It's always hopping. And please leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast app you use. For Skip, I'm Matt, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.